Morning. Hey boys, I love you guys. Let's see, what did we talk about earlier? We talked about Alaska, and oh yeah, Alaska was beautiful, so I'll tell you a little bit more about Alaska. I hope you guys are doing well. You call me when you get the chance. So I was driving down to Seward, which is on the peninsula. Well, it's below Anchorage actually, and the Air Force has a resort there, places to stay, and the Army runs a couple of fishing boats. Actually, I had a soldier that worked on one of them, and I remember driving down there, and there were Dall sheep up along the cliff, way up there on these granite cliffs, and they were eating, I guess, or doing whatever they do, and they were cool. And you get to Seward, and there's just bald eagles flying over your head everywhere, and they've got a glacier there. We were, me and my ex-wife were taking the fishing boat one morning out, and as we were coming out of Resurrection Bay. The boat actually had to stop, and we had to wait on a bear that was swimming. It was a black bear, I think it was. I can't remember now. Swimming in front of the boat. And it was a little trip. I don't remember. It was about an hour or so out to the fishing hole, in the boat. And the entire time there was this one trip, a pilot whale swam right alongside the boat, and he just was checking me out. It's windy today, and just being very social. It was interesting. And I remember another time going out there and watching humpback whales breach up out of the water, and we would catch our limit and halibut and salmon. And I remember one time we were in town after we'd been fishing or sightseeing or whatever, and there was a couple of brown bears frolicking out in the pasture near where we were eating dinner. There was just so much to see there. We went on a sightseeing tour, and there was this island full of seals or walruses or something. I can't remember what now. And there was a pod of what they said was probably 200 or 300 orcas we could see swimming around. We couldn't see all 300, 200 of them, but you could see quite a few of them swimming around the boat. It was interesting. Yeah, so that was, I loved Alaska, and I remember I was going to get out of the Army up there. Actually, I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave Alaska. I'd still love to go back to Alaska, and they were changing the base around. When I got there, it was called the Hunting and Fishing Brigade, nicknamed that because we didn't deploy, and there wasn't a lot of action. And there wasn't a lot of action about the first few years I was in the Army. There wasn't a lot that was going on, the Cold War remnants, and we were still worried about the Russians and the Chinese, I guess. And anyway, I was watching news in the morning, which was kind of my routine before I'd go to PT to do physical fitness, and there was on the news was New York, and one of the Twin Towers, which is no more, had been hit by what they said was an airplane. And I was watching, and I thought, wow, it's awful. And I'm watching, another plane goes into the other Twin Tower, and, the hair stood up on the back of my head. I knew something was wrong. And I went into PT, and I told people there what had happened. And so everything changed after that, after 9/11. I actually requested and I volunteered to deploy overseas, but I was in a unit that didn't deploy, and they weren't going to send me to one that was. So anyway, the military changed quite a bit and had to restructure, and they decided to actually turn that into a deploying unit. Well, I decided to get out, and my time was almost up. My 8 years in the Army I'd done, and I was looking for a job, and well, anyway, I ended up getting orders to come down to California to Fort Irwin, which is out, it's in the Mojave Desert. It's about 33 miles outside of Barstow. Barstow's halfway between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. Anyway, and I thought, man, I'm never going to deploy now, because Fort Irwin, what they would do is they would actually certify guys before they would deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan, make sure they were good to go and got the training they needed and this and that. A lot of training in the Army. Well, I actually drove back down to California and saw all sorts of stuff too. I love that drive. Do you ever get the chance to drive from up through the Yukon in British Columbia? It's beautiful. Anyway, so I was one thing else. What was weird was so I'd had that dream in where I saw Jesus, and we'd stopped there in Barstow, and it was kind of a surreal feeling. I'd said earlier where I'd seen the homeless family, and remembering thinking to myself, life could be worse. I could live here. Well, I ended up living in Barstow and driving to base there for a while until a year later we got housing on base. The housing was nice, but the Mojave Desert leaves something to be desired. A lot of coyotes, but and we would train. And one thing that was nice was that I was in California, and that unit, we would get either a 3-day weekend or a 4-day weekend every month, and I was close enough I could drive home, and I saw my mom about once a month, and then shortly later she died, so it was nice. I got to spend some time with my mom, your grandma, and Mary Lou. She was just the neatest lady, very loving and kind, and anyway, well, we got an announcement that we were going to have formation, where we all get together, and the Fulberg colonel, in charge of this whole regiment, I was in a cav unit, wanted to speak to us. So we knew something was up. Fulberg colonel wants to talk to everybody. That doesn't happen too often. Colonel Bear, who I respect a lot, he came down and, I deployed with that unit, and we lost a lot of guys, 17 guys. He came down from Mosul and went to every one of their services. And anyway, he told us we were deploying, and he was very honest and said, that he had just deployed and he didn't want to go back over there. And anyway, so I really like that guy. The Fulberg colonel was a big deal in the Army, but he was very vulnerable with us by sharing these things with us. I thought it was cool. So let's see. So I deployed, and the marriage with my first wife, Terry, had just gotten a little rocky, and because I screwed up, and I cheated on her, and then I told her about it right before I deployed, and just anyway. So well, you know what? I'll tell you about Iraq next time we talk, and I read the Bible this morning, and I like to do that in the morning, and I was reading Psalm 27, and in Psalm 27, David talks about, who should he fear, because he trusts in God. Talks about, some points in his life there were armies that surrounded him, an army, and he trusted in God. His father's mother forsake him. He trusted in God. All these things happened to him, but it says, that actually, he says that in the land of the living, he expects and he waits on God to get his promises from God, and God to take care of him here, not after he dies. He's waiting on God expectantly, and these are promises that we get from God, from his divine word. And I love you boys, and I'll talk to you later.